This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
This is the conversation of the day for me as a analyst on Wall Street covering the media industry for 30 years, crossed paths with this gentleman and his companies many times. Jeffrey Katzenberg, he's a co-founder of DreamWorks Animation, former chairman of the Walt Disney Studio. He's now also a member of the board of Aura. He joins us via Zoom, that Zoom thing from Los Angeles. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us here. Love to talk to you a little bit about this new move for you, Aura. What are the folks at Aura doing, and why did you join the board?
Sure. So about 5 years ago, my partners and I and the founder of Aura sort of saw this explosion of online crime. In particular, it's on a global basis, but in particular, focused on American families. 1 in 4 Americans today have actually fallen victim to some kind of online crime. It exceeded $10 billion in 2022. So this is a trend that is bad and only getting worse as all of our lives get more and more, built into our online activities. And it's interesting because it's not that there are no solutions to it, it's that there are hundreds of them. And they're complicated and they're expensive, and it was hard to know, well, what do I actually need? What would protect me and my family? And so that's what we went out to sort of build a company to address that, to solve that, and have built Aura, I think, into what today is quickly becoming really the top of the line all-in-one protection for families, both your children and your parents, many of which are have been the victims of scams and robocalls and all of these things that are, beyond, they started annoying and then they get to actually damaging.
So what are some of the products, or what are some of the markets and the products that Aura brings that you think can be helpful?
Well, here are let me just give you some of the features and functions that we have. So we have identity and credit protection, antivirus. We have an AI powered call and message protection, so that we actually can sort of build this protective dome around you, in which we can filter anybody penetrating into you, your children. Lots of things for parents to be able to put various controls and monitoring of what our kids are doing, where they are, what sites they're on. And we can go on to a very long list of features and functions here. Our objective is actually to be able to offer the widest, set of features and functions, and knowing that different people have different needs. I don't know each of you, but I promise you, your profiles, your needs, your parents, whether you have kids or not. And what we want to do is just be a one-stop shopping for everybody. And I would tell you, when I look at today and the trends, none of us will get in a car today and not put a seatbelt on.
Yep.
5 years from now, I don't believe any of us will be online without having Aura or some version of that. It's our vulnerabilities are extreme and only getting greater, and the liability is just not worth it anymore. And so I'm quite excited, quite proud of the company that's been built and the work that Hari and my partner Sujay have done in building this company out. Robert Downey just recently came on board as a board member, as an investor, and as a spokesperson for the company. So we're on a great path to build something that does good while doing good.
Jeffrey, I wanted to switch gears and get your thoughts about the writers-actors strike in Hollywood. And obviously, when you're thinking about the proliferation when it comes to
So I do
AI.
want to say, I'm surprised it only took you the second question to get to that, but okay.
I mean, how do you think this will impact those jobs when it comes to the AI hype and the future of it?
Well, I'm not going to try and parse out what are, I think, very challenging issues. But I will say there are a few things that I think all strikes have in common with one another. One, they begin, and two, they end. Also, interestingly, if you look at strikes, whether they are lockouts or walkouts, the length of a strike does not correlate to a better outcome. And so, in this particular one, you actually have both parties are facing very, very challenging, problematic, and some would go as far as to say existential issues for them. So they're particularly difficult and particularly complex. In the case of the writers, the industry structurally has changed so significantly. The ability to have the type of employment that they have had now for 75, 100 years is diminished, and you can see that it's on a path to continue to. So that's really problematic. Obviously, the introduction of AI as a creative tool, it's both an asset, but also I think could be a liability. From the producer studio standpoint, you have an equally challenging and complex set of structural changes that they are wrestling with. And so I've tried to be objective in understanding that both parties here are looking at very, very challenging circumstances, which is why it's seemingly become very difficult to get them aligned. But here's the thing I would say to you, as certain as we are in a conversation about this in this moment, this strike will end.
Right.
It will end. And whether it's going to end in a day or a week or a month or 4 months, a year, it will end. And so the damage that is being felt on both sides of this isn't actually ultimately going to determine the outcome.
Right.
So for me, I just desperately want to see both sides get back to the table.
Yep.
And actually wrestle these things through.
And Jeffrey, you mentioned the big existential issue for the media industry, and as a Wall Street analyst covering the space for 30 years, I've never seen anything like it, where this industry has to pivot from the traditional model where cable companies and satellite companies aggregated a big bunch of audience, and then the content creators leveraged that, and that's everybody kind of had a nice economic return to now one of streaming.
But it's even more complicated than that, because what you have is 75 years of an ecosystem that was built on a waterfall of rights.
Yep.
From window to window to window of various distribution platforms, both domestically and globally. And as those have consolidated, there is less opportunity to exploit the content, and therefore less opportunity for talent to participate in the rewards of that.
Yep.
And so it's challenged on both sides of the equation, both for the production and studios who are making the content. They don't have as many outlets to exploit their content. And for the creators, who were rewarded for their success. And they were rewarded through a very long pipeline of, whether it was from free TV to pay to cable to syndication, international. There were all of these different places of exploitation of which they actually got rewards for great work.
Yeah, I know it's an incredibly difficult time, but one could argue maybe it's a good time for a strike to get all these issues out on the table. Jeffrey Katzenberg, thank you so much for joining us. Jeffrey Katzenberg is a co-founder of DreamWorks Animation, former chairman of the Walt Disney Studios, and member of the board of Aura. He joins us on the phone, on the Zoom actually, from the City of Angels, Los Angeles. Bringing our next guest here, Marcus Shaw. He's the chief executive officer for a company called AltFinance. He joins us live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Marcus, just set us the stage here. What is AltFinance? What are you trying to do at AltFinance?
So AltFinance is an organization that's dedicated to helping encourage more students from historically black colleges and universities understand careers in finance, specifically alternative investments, and providing them with the education, experience, and exposure to help pursue careers in alternative investments, private equity, private credit, and real estate.
And you also have a fellowship program. Talk to us about that.
Correct. We have an amazing fellowship program. We now have 119 fellows that are currently in our program. We graduated our first 14 fellows in May of 2023, and those fellows are going on to work at investment banks and alternative investment firms and management consulting firms focusing on private equity. We're so excited about the success that we had with that first class, but our fellows are growing, and so we expect even more success in years to come.
What is Wall Street's view on hiring from HBCUs, just in generally, or minority hiring in general? What are they trying to? Because it's so competitive.
Well, it's a very competitive industry, and I think the perspective, particularly around HBCUs, are that the companies really didn't know where these schools were. HBCUs have a rich history and are a big part of the fabric of this country.
Yep.
Obviously, our current vice president,
Yep.
Kamala Harris, is an HBCU alum, along with many other luminaries in politics and entertainment and business and so forth. So it's been a contributing factor to the American fabric for several hundred years now, a couple of hundred years, but has not been a big part of the recruiting process for finance and for Wall Street. And so what we're trying to do is create those relationships, those pathways, so that the best and brightest students at places like Howard University and Morehouse College, Spelman College, Clark Atlanta University are aware of the career opportunities that exist outside of sales and trading and investment banking.
Okay.
How are the resources when it comes to things like endowments?
So one place where historically black colleges and universities have certainly struggled is having the financial resources to keep up with the infrastructure battle that is happening in higher education. The students are brilliant, the professors are incredibly resourceful, but building the endowments has been a place of challenge. There is not a single HBCU today that has an endowment over $1 billion. When you look at other schools, right, that are non-HBCU schools, even of the same size, many of them will have larger endowments, and that allows students to have a lower cost of attendance. It allows you to build scholarships. It allows you to endow professorships, which allows you to also retain professors for a longer period of time. So HBCUs are doing all of this great work without all of the resources that some of the other schools have.
So why is that?
So I think there's a couple of key issues. Number one, you're dealing with a population of student and alum that historically have served a higher population of low-income students. All right, that's number one. Number two, and this is part of what we're solving for through AltFinance, is that there hasn't been as much awareness of some of the higher compensated career paths like alternative investments that can lead to very well-rewarded and highly compensated alum that can then pour back into the school and use their networks to pour back into the school. So one of the things that we're doing is trying to show highly talented students where high-paying, high-rewarding career paths are and encouraging them to continue to give back to their schools in a higher level. And so I think that's part of it. I think that there's also, what we see naturally is the reason why HBCUs needed to exist is because we were in a segregated education system. The vestiges of that continue to exist in some ways that show up in terms of funding for the schools. Mm-hmm. And so we need more corporate funding, we need more alumni giving, we need greater fundraising so that we can continue to give the students at HBCUs all the best and brightest infrastructure and opportunities that they deserve.
Are HBCUs, this is ignorance on my part, are they private? Are they public? Or are there some of each?
There is a mix. There is
Okay.
a mix of both. And actually, it was through the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that the government designated historically black colleges and universities. And there are 104, roughly 104 HBCUs in the country. There's a portion of them that are public. There's a portion of them that are private. And the funding model for those can be very different,
Yep.
much like a non-HBCU school. But generally across the board, we still see that HBCUs are underfunded, whether they're public or private.
So as a CEO, and you started your career at IBM, you obviously got your MBA from Duke. You and Paul were talking about that earlier. What's your view and your vision when it comes to students that are in your programs, and as far as what that could mean for other potential future CEOs?
I think, and I'd like to also give a shout out Morehouse College. So I was a Morehouse alum as well. And I think that as I look at students that are graduating from HBCUs today, I see them as having an incredible network of young men and young women that they're going to school with, in the same way that Ivy Leagues have an incredible network, in the same way that large state schools have an incredible network. Many of these students will go on to great graduate schools, law school, medical school, business school, and they will build even broader networks that are more powerful. There's real value because we believe that there is power in diversity of networks, diversity of thought, diversity of experience. These students ultimately in the workplace will have some of the most diverse experiences of any person in this country. And that's valuable to companies and corporations that are looking for people that are bringing new ideas, new experiences to the table so that they can develop and innovate, so that they can invest, so that they can lead.
Marcus, what's the biggest challenge that you face just day to day here?
I think the biggest challenge that we see is getting students, number one, to understand what the opportunity set looks like for a career in alternative investments. For many of our students, although they are incredibly bright and always will be destined for a great career, they don't have a lot of transparency or a lot of clarity around what a career in alternative investments would look like. And so creating that exposure and some of that co-education around how to manage a career, moving from banking to private equity, is something that's very new to students that don't have a network of people that are already in that business or not highly exposed to that even before college. So that's one of the challenges that we face.
That is fascinating stuff. I'm glad we got to get a few minutes of your time. That's Marcus Shaw. He's the Chief Executive Officer for AltFinance, joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. We appreciate that. Doing some important work, increasing diversity on Wall Street, which continues to be a challenge, but a lot of good folks are doing some good work there. So we appreciate getting a few minutes of Marcus's time.